Well, welcome to FCCI's Pathway to Purpose webinar. And we are excited that we'll be featuring Greg Gilbert today of Blue Trust. And as he dives into this topic of RichWork and how leaders can multiply their purpose, inspire their teams, and achieve better results. And before we get into that and bring Greg on screen, let me remind you of some of the opportunities that FCCI has available to you as a Christian business leader. Top on that list is this webinar, and thanks for participating with us here today. You'll receive greater value if you do go ahead and introduce yourself and engage in the chat with others and contribute with your questions and conversation. We will have some Q&A time with Greg after his presentation, so make sure you take part in that and be thinking of ways that you can further the conversation. Our goal is to equip and encourage the continued growth of God's kingdom work through our fellowship of members, friends, and strategic partners like Blue Trust. So take advantage of this opportunity to connect and build those kingdom relationships. Well, a great resource that we have available to you, of course, is the FCCI website. And when you jump over there and dig into that top menu navigation, there's just so many opportunities, but one of those being our FCCI Connect app. And if we go under that navigational menu option there of Engage with FCCI and drop down to the FCCI Connect app, and that'll drop you into an opportunity to become a member of Connect, which is free. And we'd love to have you in there. We've got about 900 members in there at this time. And so love to have you be a part of that conversation and be contributing there in the Connect app. Another great opportunity for you later this year that we're just super excited about is the FCCI International Conference. It will be held at the Ritz-Carlton, Sarasota, Florida this year. And we'd love for you to get on the invite list and to make sure that you can be a part of that opportunity. So make sure you jump in there and request your invite and plan to be with us September 22nd through 24th there at the Ritz-Carlton. It's going to be a wonderful time as we come together with great leaders, great conversation, great learning and growth together. Another opportunity I'd love for you to be aware of is our new initiative from FCCI that we're just so excited about called Banded. And Banded brings together CEOs, executives, business owners who are high caliber leaders looking for that next level of community, accountability, wholehearted living, can come together in monthly peer advisory groups and be in person together, enjoying curated trips together, other experiences and opportunities together. So learn more, go over to joinbanded.com, or you can email the Banded crew at info@joinbanded.com. So do that and take advantage of the opportunity to be together with other like-minded, like-hearted leaders from around the country and enjoy those trips and those opportunities to go together and experience that time together. So again, joinbanded.com or info@joinbanded.com. Well, our next webinar, I am super excited because we're bringing a great friend of FCCI in to be a part of the conversation with us on April 15th. And so, yes, we are providing you with a wonderful distraction on tax day. So we'll be featuring Lori Bean. Lori is a great friend. She's a part of our FCCI Nashville group, and she has been for many years. For a significant season of her life, actually served as facilitator of that group. And so she's been just a wonderful friend and just a biblically grounded leader. She has tremendous career coaching insight and understanding of HR practices and the idea of bringing together just a team of God-honoring folks in a team culture. And so don't miss this highly informative conversation with Lori. She's the owner of Panache there in Nashville, a career counselor, someone you just really need to know. So plan to join us on April 15. There'll be a registration opportunity for you in the email that will come out following today's webinar. So as we get ready to jump into today's content with Greg Gilbert, many of you know Greg. For those of you who haven't had an opportunity to sit down and get to know Greg, he serves as a private wealth advisor in the private wealth division and professional athlete division of Blue Trust in Atlanta, Georgia. He's a senior partner of the company. He's a managing director, and Greg oversees the day-to-day operations, growth opportunities, expansion of the office there in Atlanta. In addition to his leadership role, Greg works with individuals, with families, and businesses using his objective perspective to help them make wise financial decisions, experience clarity, confidence, and leave a lasting legacy. Greg and his wife, Lisa, currently live in Atlanta, Georgia with their 3 children. And currently, I believe Greg is sitting in Sylacauga, Alabama. Hey, Greg, how are you, sir?
Hey, Ken. I am indeed. And I'm here with some other FCCI friends, but happy to join you today. Good to see you.
Great to have you. And my understanding is you recently celebrated 25 years with Blue Trust.
I did. Yeah, last August, I joined in August of 1999. So I'm working on my 26th year currently. And it's been quite a ride over many different types of investment markets
Hmm.
and changes. And the world we live in is different a little bit than it was now, but uncertainty has been the thing that has remained constant.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, walking through that, I know we're going to dig into that topic today. How do we do that as leaders? But what would be like some highlights? Is there a highlight from the past 25 years that really stands out to you?
I think the highlight is amidst the difficulties and the challenges. I mean, there's been hard economic seasons.
Hmm.
There's been hard seasons that clients have been going through that we've been there to walk alongside of them. There's been hard times with team and team
Hmm.
members and personally. Just think about 25 years, there's a lot of great things, but there's also a lot of hard things. And
Sure.
so to
Yeah.
see what's happened and
Hmm.
for God to have brought us through and brought me through
Hmm.
and just his faithfulness and all the different seasons, that, it's part of what he promises. But when you
Yeah.
experience it, you have a different level of understanding about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Well, Greg, I know we're really excited about this content and helping us unlock greater potential, help our teams elevate to new heights. So I'm going to step out of the way and let you just dig in and share with us. And again, just thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Ken, for that intro, and thanks everyone for joining today. Yeah, the idea of work, when you think about it, is a significant one in our lives. And when I think about the work that I've done at Blue Trust, but also think about FCCI, and I think about each of you that are joining today, obviously we are coming because faith matters to us and our relationship with Christ matters to us. And we're trying to wrestle with saying, how do we take our faith and bring it into the work that we get to do day in and day out and over a lifetime, Lord willing. And so, first of all, the connection with FCCI, our company started in the late 70s. FCCI joined. The organization started in 1979 as well. So there's been just a closeness, a relationship, and mindedness of like wrestling through how do we take what God's word says and apply it to the whole of our lives. But for us, finances and marriages and legacy and family and FCCI, all the same things, but also a big business focus. And so happy to wrestle with these ideas with you all today. I've been, like I said, working at Blue Trust for 25 years, but this message is one that is a biblical view of work. And so if we want to think about two things today, I'd love for you to be able to take away is purpose and breakthrough. So I'd love for you to have a better understanding and a deeper level of conviction around purpose, but also breakthrough. And a lot of times when I share the message, it's to people that are working, maybe people that are in their 20s, maybe people that are in their early 30s. And there may be some of you here today, and hopefully this is impactful for you. And I'm also some of this message to go for people that are leading. So if they've been leading for 10 or 20 years or more, and maybe in their 40s and 50s and even 60s and beyond, that there's something in here that as we lead our organizations, understanding purpose, not just for ourselves, but for those that we're leading, as well as breakthrough. Like when we speed of the leader, speed of the team, your time matters a lot. And it's an interesting thing about our time. We probably spend about a third of our lives, and if you went to each individual, you might can move the numbers around a little bit, but maybe a fourth or a third of our lives is dedicated to work. For a long part of that, maybe 20, 30 years, maybe half of our waking hours, at least during the week for most of us, would be dedicated to this work thing. So how could we spending so much time in this area? And yet, how tragic if we miss the opportunity to not identify the purpose that God has for us in it. So in my work, what I've been able to do is sit up front and close and personal with a lot of people, a lot of couples, and a lot of leaders, and see how work has come into the whole of their lives. And Brian, if you go ahead and move the next slide, if you will. This is, me, and I've been here, as we said, at Blue Cross for 25 years and working with leaders and figuring this thing myself, like what is work and what is the purpose and what does God's word have to say about work? Next slide. And so the whole of our lives, many different areas. And if you see vocation there, vocation's a big part of our lives. And yet at the same time, it's not the only thing that we have going on. And being able to sit front with a lot of leaders and see the way that they worked, maybe things that they did well, and maybe see things that they maybe would have changed over time. There have been very stark differences in the outcomes that have happened in people's lives as they engage with work. If we think about what we're trying to do with our money, we want to bring a biblical view of money. We want to bring a biblical view of work. We want to bring a biblical view of relationships into the whole of our lives. And yet, work is a significant part of that. Now, if we were to back aside and say, I want to tell God's story of God and humanity, right? If we were going to do that, where would we begin? Well, if we look at the next slide, we'll see that if we open the pages of Scripture, the story of God and humanity and where we find God in the very beginning, what's he doing? He's at work, right? Genesis 1 and 2 goes through step by step by step and lays out the details and the aspects of who God is and the aspect of how he brings that into the work and the creativity, the design of what he's up to. And one of the things as we think about the idea of stewardship, and I love the big idea of stewardship, it's not just our tithe, which it is. It's not just our money, which it is, but it's everything is God's. Psalm 24:1 says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So everything in this is from him and for him. And yet he's inviting us into the creativity. He's inviting us into the details to be able to join with him. And if you think about two columns in our lives, everything that is around us, right now I'm looking out a window and I see trees and I see bushes and plants. And if I look a little bit to a different direction, I see cars and I maybe see somebody walking. And so I see the things that God has designed and created directly. And then I see another column of things that maybe man with God's ingredients have created out of maybe God's imagination and God's inspiration and God's shaping of that individual or that team. And so everything around us is either God directly created it or he's allowed and give the ability to humans, to us, to people, to teams to be able to create. Something I want to tell you then from the very beginning, God's word is saying that purpose is already here in the work of whatever it is you're doing. It's not out there for you to find as much as it is within how he's created you to be. He's asking you to join him in creation and in creating and in making this world a place that honors him. On the next slide, I want to talk to you about the next aspect of that. And we think about the full gospel. Usually there's the creation, there's the fall, there's salvation, gratefully, right? Jesus came and he's risen. And then what happens? Well, then there's the renewal, the reconciliation of all things. And that's where we are right now is no matter what we're doing, the lives that we lead, the vessels that we are becoming, and how that applies to our relationships, applies to the work of our hands as we get a chance to be Jesus wherever we show up. So all the work that we're doing is a part of that. So the work that we're doing is helping to bring in God into all of the world and all of society and all the different areas that our hands may touch. So the next step in that is that we are all one body together. And we are one body, but we are different roles. So on the next slide, you'll just see a little demonstration that we can do great things together as the body of Christ. And I love how the scripture says that, we don't want, what if the eye was to go to the ear or what if the hand wanted to be the foot? We need every member of the body working together, which means we all have different roles, right? I was at a U2 concert with my wife in the Sphere in Las Vegas a little over a year ago. Some friends invited us out, this brand new facility, just digital screens everywhere. And I was thinking about all the different steps and components that went into that performance. And obviously, we all know about Bono, and know about the singer, and we know about the band. But you think about the security, and you think about the people that were serving, giving out refreshments, and you think about the people that were working on the sound, and all the different components that were required for that performance to be what it was. We all have different roles, and all the team members in your organization or on your team have different roles, and they're all very valuable. So, as a leader, what we need to do is also make sure that everyone is aware of how their role and their purpose in that role connect to the greater good, that we need each other in order to accomplish the things that we're going to be able to do together. There's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we go far as believers, and we want to think beyond ourselves as leaders and as team members and be able to go further together. So from here, where do we go? Well, there are different roles, but there's all still just one mission. In 1 Corinthians 12, as I mentioned, there's many parts and there's just one body. But leaders, I have a question for you. How are you connecting the results and the mission of what you have to those that are on your teams? So one example is for us, we do financial advising. We do it from a biblical perspective. And so 3 of our key roles on our team would be an advisor who's leading the relationship with the client, giving a lot of the counsel, setting the direction and the course. We have a planner. It's another role, more of a supporting role that helps really make things happen, does research, pulls things together. We have our CSAs who help set up meetings, help accounts get funded with money, and help take care of things day to day for our clients. Advisors, a lot of times, are in the seat of being able to deliver that, what we call impact, or that direct client experience. Planners sometimes are. Our CSAs are often not necessarily in that role or not directly in the role. So it'd be easy for the advisors to experience that impact and see how that's happening. It would be a little bit harder for our planners, and it'd be a lot harder for our CSAs. So as leaders, how are we taking everybody and helping them understand their role and what their contributions are to impacting the whole mission that we have together? So on the next slide, let me ask you a question. Which of these is closest to God, right? If you're to take a minister or a missionary or a teacher or a therapist or a business leader or a janitor or a server, which of these is closest to God, right? So I think when we ask it that way, I think maybe for most of us, it becomes pretty apparent that, they're all critical and important to God, and that God needs or chooses, he doesn't need us, but he chooses to allow us to join him in the work, no matter where we are. And what's important for all of those individuals and all those professionals is to approach the work that they have from a Colossians 3:23 perspective. So do your work with all your heart unto the Lord, not men, right? No matter what we do, God should be reflective in our work. Again, we don't need to go seek our purpose out there. God has already put it within us. The question is, how are we doing right now, where we are, with what we have and what he's provided for us? So next we move to the big idea, then what is work? And so as we kind of look forward at the next slide and we talk about this idea of what is work, we're going to jump to even the next slide, which we're going to work on looking at the whole of you. And I think this is an area that is so critical, which it speaks to our identity. And the identity of who we are sometimes gets confused with our work. And what we try to show here is that the whole of you is there, and work is just a part of that, right? It's an important part. As we mentioned, God has purpose in that part of it. But I have some friends that are athletes. Some of them are retired NFL. And if you think about their identity and the whole of who they are, they get labeled as an athlete very, very young. They get known for success. They get pats on the back. They get recognized, celebrated, all these things as an athlete, as a football player, basketball, baseball, what have you. But that's not the whole of who they are. But the challenge is when that's all that they think they are, and they think that's the whole of their identity, they get, let's say, 20 years of this, immersed in this world, immersed in this identity, and then they get to the other side and it's taken away from them. Who are they? And they've lost who they are because they got it messed up from the beginning in terms of thinking that their image and their identity was something that it was not. So what we do is a part of who we are. It's a part of who God is. When we open the scriptures, we saw that God was working, but God is much more than just a worker, much more than just a designer. So we need to not allow our identity to become, as a work, become the whole view of ourselves. And that's something that's very important this day and age. On the next slide, you'll see that if you take the whole of your work skills, all the work skills that you've ever done. I was seeing recently an idea in a post on Shaquille O'Neal, right? Obviously, he's on the other side of his athlete basketball career. Now, he's still known for that, but he's doing a lot of other things. He's a commentator on TV. He also owns like 50 or more Five Guys restaurants, along with some other franchises, and he's doing a lot of different things, right? So if you look back even on Shaq, or think about your life, or think about my life and the different roles that I've had over time, how many of those were involved in just one role? Typically, the whole of who you are from an ability standpoint is not just contained in one role. And realistically, we are all evolving and changing, and our skill set is growing. And so it's not just one role that's going to contain the whole of all your work skills. So if you ever find yourself going, I think there's something else out there, I think I'm able to do other things, that would be true probably of all of us. And so at the same time, where are we right now? Where does God have us? And how are we focused on what he has right in front of us? And that's not to say there won't be changes over time. And that's not to say that maybe there aren't side projects and other things that you want to do, or getting involved in a charity that expresses a different side of you. I've done some of that in my life as well. But just, it's a good point to remember that one job probably won't contain the whole of your work skills. In my time at Blue, I was also a regional managing director where I oversaw 6 offices. I also am a managing director where I lead our Atlanta team, but I also serve clients, which is why I got into the big business to begin with, to be able to serve people. So I've had different roles within the last few years, and none of them contain the whole of my work ability. But I think this next slide is a really critical one for perspective of where we are today. And so if you think about generations and generational view of work, something that I've noticed is that some people on the far left will think work is just a job. And I've said, so tell me what you think work is for you. It's just a job. Some will say it's something you kind of have to do. You're required to do it. You know, you need to make money. You got to buy things. It's a necessary evil. And yet I don't think that's what God's ultimate design for it was. On the other hand, you may have someone that wants it to be their everything. And even from a spiritual biblical perspective, spoken to some students at Christian colleges, and sometimes it can be, I'm looking for God to kind of shine a light on this thing, and I'm really not going to get engaged until I'm clear that God has called me to do this. And I think both of them might be missing the point of what God has for us. And I think, as we've mentioned, he has this meaningful purpose for work in our lives. So what is meaningful purpose? Well, I think God is more concerned with how we do something than what we do. So I'll say that again. I think it's more important how we do things from God's perspective. What's our character? What's the love that's being shown? How are we serving others? How are we bringing our whole heart to the work in front of us, no matter what it is, more than what we do? Now, I think God cares about what we do as well. But I think at the end of the day, he wants to shape our character and develop our hearts to pursue him more than any specific role that he may have. You know, Jesus obviously had a very strong purpose while he was here, but he was also a blessing wherever he went. He was also seeking God and spending time getting to know God and being close to God, no matter where he went. So God wants to use you right now, where you are, with what you have, and meaningful purpose is available when we follow God's design. And so one clarifying perspective can be, if we think back in history on the next slide and think about the whole world, whatever's true about work should be true throughout history, which is on the bottom, but also throughout the whole world, which is on the top with the globe there. So whatever's true about work should be true 2,000 years ago with a shepherd. And also it should be true across the world with maybe a fifth generation Indonesian farmer. No matter what we look at, one of the things that we are faced with right now is a perspective in the US, which is we have more wealth, we have more options. And if you're familiar with the hierarchy of needs, we are self-actualizing more. But what the foundations of is work is created by God to be good. So let's kind of go through the next two slides. And I want to go to the one where it shows a child out in the field. Think back to your childhood and the chores that you were involved in. Think about the things that you did that brought value to yourself and the family, right? These may not have been your life passions, right? Cleaning your room, doing the laundry, taking out the trash, but they had purpose in them. What was the purpose? Purpose was teaching you skills, helping you take care of yourself, helping you take care of others, being part of something bigger than yourself. It was equipping you for life. All of these things came out of your earliest versions and my earliest versions of work. So work fundamentally is good. Work already, as we have mentioned, has purpose. So let's move on to the next. So then what else do we know about work? Well, work is one of God's primary means of provision for us. Think about that. In all the ways that God provides, one of the primary means and sources of God's provision is through the work of our hands. And it may be different for everybody, and there may be some that are limited, but for most of us, that's probably true. Not only that, when we are being blessed by him and providing for ourselves, now we're in position to be able to bless others. And I think about when we go onto an airplane ride, and they say, hey, if anything happens, make sure you take the mask and you put it on first. I think it's the same way with provision. Are we putting the mask on first, not just to take care of ourselves, but to make ourselves in a stronger place so that we can then be used to bless others around us? So it's not just for ourselves, it's also for others. What were some of the earliest jobs that you had in your teens or maybe as a preteens? I know growing up, I cut yards and I was later teens working at Chick-fil-A. And on the next slide, we could just see somebody there at a lemonade stand. I don't know if that was ever your experience, or maybe you babysat or different jobs that you might have had along the way. But that was something that taught you provision. And now you learned how to take care of money. Now you learned how to work for other people. When I had to cut yards for the first time, I remember thinking, this is not like cutting yards for my family or even my grandparents. You know, I got to make sure I'm on time. I got to make sure that it's done well. I got to make sure it's at another level. And there's another level of growth that happened in my life through that experience. So we can see in this progression of this chart on the next slide that there's work is good, work is for provision. And now the next one is work is through all of that is developing skills. So work gives us a toolbox. It's a toolbox, it's equipping, and it's shaping us. But we have to be able to access this and all of these skills in the doing, right? We can't just read about it. We can't just talk about it. It's in the doing. So on the next slide, I've got a little grid here just showing how these are some of the skills, hypothetical skills that maybe you or I or others have gathered. And you could put other skills in here, but think about skills that you've developed in the course of your life. Now, these skills were not developed like a boat just being in the harbor. We've got to get the boat out on the seas. We've got to get it moving. And in the moving and in the being out there and in the doing, now we can start to shape and shift. So if I look at this grid over time, I may say, you know what, the 3 or 4 boxes in that top right corner, those really speak to me. I'm better at those. I really resonate more with those. So it's in the doing that we gain the tools, but it's also in the doing that we're reflecting and learning about ourselves. And that leads to the next chart, which is looking at how in these skill sets, now we can say, this is my interest. These are things that I really enjoy. I thought I wanted to be a pilot and I got right up to the solo and I realized this is not for me. I know a lot of my friends now are wanting to learn how to fly, or it's a dream of theirs to do it, a couple that are doing it. But for me, as a career, it was not what I wanted to do. And that was valuable because that got me one step closer to what God had for me to do. So it can be very valuable, but it's in the doing. And then God, I believe, will direct us. The next slide just says, you know what, no matter what you do, your primary objective is to deliver value. And we're going to explore this a little bit more. But let me ask you a question. This is for all of us on this webinar today. Do you know what that is? Do you know what your role is and how it adds value? And do you know who it adds value for? Right? The next slide, we're going to look, yes, we get paid at a certain level for the value that we bring. But let's be the kind of people that are doing work unto the Lord, not man, and we're always adding more value than we're being paid. I kind of did a grid on the next slide, whereas sometimes people get paid one amount and they work less, but that's where I believe they think they're making a profit. I remember working at Chick-fil-A, and it seemed like one of the guys in the back was slacking off and clocking in a little bit late and leaving a little bit early and not really engaged. And I was looking around going, that's fair. But if I look at it from this perspective, I wish I would have known this then is, well, guess where that career probably goes? Maybe he changed and maybe he did things differently. And maybe someone spoke into his life at a different point in time, but that's where that pathway goes, I believe. But what if I clock in and clock out and do what's required, but not really a whole lot else? That's that other slide. Where does that career go? I think that's kind of where it goes. It goes across. So if you're sitting there looking at your career right now, number one, hopefully, I hope you understand you've got meaningful purpose where God has you. Have a perspective of being a blessing to all those that are around you, to your team, to clients, to customers, to the project at hand. But I also hope you understand that let's be people that in this next slide, visually showing you this to you, can go beyond and add more value than being paid. And I believe that God will bless this over time. And it might not come in the first week, probably won't come in the first few months, probably won't. But what we're doing is we're building into ourselves. And as we think about the skills that we're acquiring, they're going to be greater and greater nuanced skills when we're bringing our best and adding more value than we're being paid than if we tried it a different way. So let's pull all of this together. And you'll see here on this next chart that if we look at all of this, I think what this will be for us is this will be bringing a perspective of work that ultimately adds gratitude. And also gratitude comes with resilience. And I don't know if you've ever put those two together, but imagine Paul being in prison, being in really a difficult situation in every respect, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And yet, what was he doing in prison? Going through something really, really hard. He had praise, he had gratitude, he had thanksgiving unto the Lord. And so I think if we have God's perspective, then it brings a different perspective around gratitude. But along with the gratitude also comes resilience. And I think Paul was resilient. Not only was he praising, but man, he was resilient, continuing to do what God had him to do every step of the way. So that's purpose. Now let's speak more directly to you as leaders. And let's go to the next slide. So I think if you resonate with this, have you reached a ceiling or a plateau, maybe in your organization? Maybe it's with the work. Maybe you've been doing the same thing kind of in the same way for a number of years. And it feels like you're just continuing to be very much in the same place that you've been for a while. Sometimes it can come in the stages of our life in our career. So I would recommend to someone that's younger, maybe in their 20s, early 30s, say yes a lot, like get exposure, go say yes to that project, be on that team, try that work, try that job. But when you're older, now we need to go more narrow. So if we're going more broad when we're younger, when we're older, we need to go more narrow. We need to filter more. So we need to, what we were saying yes to earlier, now as we're getting older, we need to start saying no a lot more and refining and filtering. And so asking the question is, what is it that you do that drives the greatest value for you? And are you aware of what that is? So if we go to the next slide, you'll see this is really in the target of your time. And think about it. We've got our watches on, got our iPhones, we've got our calendars. But what is it that our time is being spent on, especially as leaders? And what does it look like for you today? What does it look like for you this week? Recently I was trying to do some things with my nutrition, and I went and got the Lose It app. And the Lose It app helped me track my calories, track my protein. I was trying to get more protein. And when I started tracking it, it created a lot of awareness. And in that awareness, it helped me make better choices. And I don't know if you've ever looked at your time and looked at where your time is being spent. And so there's a different value for what your time could be bringing you. Let me ask you a question. If you could do 3 things by the end of the year. So we're here sitting here on 12/31 of this year, looking back over all the months that transpired. What do you need to spend your time on? What are those 3 things that you need to spend most of your time making sure they're accomplished? One of the realizations for all of this is beginning with the understanding that we cannot do everything. God can, gratefully, right? He can make anything happen. But you and I, we can't. We are limited. And it can be very freeing once we realize that we're not designed to do everything. And we're not supposed to do everything. We're not supposed to save the world. God's up to that. Now, God wants us to do our part. Gratefully, he's allowed us to be a part of the journey. But your time is limited. Your energy is limited, but it's very valuable. And we want to be purposeful and intentional with the lives that God has for us. So how much time are you spending on the things in your week, and where's that time going for you? On the next slide, I just want to emphasize the fact that, if you think about the Pareto principle, and the Pareto principle is simply the 80-20 rule, right? The idea here is that 20% of your time is driving 80% of your results. So think about that in your organization, with your team, in your role. 20% of your time is driving 80% of your value, or 80% of your results. That's massive. And so for you, maybe it's 15% of your time, maybe it's 25, but in there somewhere, probably for most of us, is that idea. But what if, well, first of all, what are those things? So if we kind of go to the next slide, we need to start asking the questions. What is your highest and best use? Because your time is limited, your energy is limited, and where does your time need to go? If we think about this triangle, and there's 3 levels to the triangle, the highest level, like what 4 bullet points on the side, if you have to write down the 3 or 4 biggest drivers of value for your team and for your company, for you to be spending your time on with your ability, what would those be? If we looked at the mid-level items, what would that be? Well, that might be things like things we're required to do. No one else can really do it yet. It's important for us to do. Maybe you kind of have to do it with your role, but it's not ultimately driving the most value. I would say a lot of times for the highest value, it could be things like, for me, it's serving our clients. Some of the things that I'm doing, leading our team. It's also getting in front of potential new clients. But for you, what might be some of those highest level things for you? What happens is the mid-level and the lowest level things will crowd out the highest. That's what normally happens. It's the ringing phone. It's the emails during the day. It's the, hey, need your help with this. And it's the present. It's the urgent. And unfortunately, if we're not intentional with our time on, first of all, clarity, knowing what our highest value activities are, then what's the chances of us being able to spend more of our time on those things? On the next slide, I'm just going to propose something that I learned through this program called Strategic Coach. So this is roughly what they talk about. If you structure the 365 days of your year, and let's just say different types of work, we have different flexibility, different types of schedules, but just generally speaking, if you had a normal work week, then you would have 52 weekends a year, which times 2 days of Saturday and Sunday would be 104 days. If you added in holidays, if you added in some vacation days, and everybody's going to be in a little bit of a different spot, but maybe a rough number might be 150, what we call free days. So that's not work really happening on that. That's out of the picture. Now we're left with around 215 or so. So the way that they divide our time is part of it is what we call internal or buffer or preparation days. And the idea there is you're taking care of your team. You may be preparing for upcoming meetings or a project, depending upon the type of work that you do. But really, our highest and best use is those focus days. So the focus days would be that area that we drive the most value. Currently, maybe it's only 20% of your time. But imagine if we were clear on what those items were, and we were clear on how would we be able to get, let's say, 20% of our time up to 40 or 50%. So if we could double or maybe even more the amount of time we're spending in our focused highest value, then we could even double and maybe even more than that, the value that we're bringing to our companies and to our people and to our teams. And this benefits not just us, but it benefits our teams, as you're going to see in just a minute. But this would be a way of structuring your year. And when I did this for the first time, what I realized is there is not much time, right? Like time really is limited. There really is not a whole lot of time in our year. Man, it's going to go fast. You start taking away 150 days, and then you're left, you got 108 prep days, and man, focus time of only 107, 2 to 2.5 days a week. Wow, that goes really, really fast. On the next slide, though, let's think about from structuring a year to structuring your week. So how is your week structured? For me, roughly, I typically will do an internal day, which means team meetings, some leadership internal meetings on Monday, meeting with team members one-on-one, maybe potential client review days and time going on there. Fridays are also blocked for internal, and then a partial day on Wednesday. Now, this doesn't happen this way every week. It's definitely not clean like this, but it's an aspiration, and it's something that I do put on the calendar. Then that way I have Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays for client meetings, for potential client meetings, and for other things that might be valuable in my role. That's just as an example, but what might that look like for you? What would your year look like? And then let's bring it down a weekly and maybe even a daily level in terms of what that would look like for you. So on the next slide, how does all this start to really work together? Well, if you've got to start by being clear on what your highest and best use is. You need to know what those things are and how you're going to do more of them. And then you need to identify those lower level items are items that you need to either delegate, get rid of, do less of, allow technology to take care of it. Those are things that are crowding out your highest and best use, and they need your attention in order to get them off your plate or reduce the amount of them on your plate. But it's also a good opportunity for others. Sometimes the things that don't give us energy, somebody else on our team or somebody else we could hire would love to do that thing. I know some leaders are great at being entrepreneurial, but they are not good at numbers, and they need somebody really on top of the numbers to be in the midst of that in order to elevate them. There's many times that an individual employee or business owner hires that first assistant or executive assistant, and it's almost like their world starts to change overnight because things that were hard for them or frustrating for them, they've now elevated their time. But it also works in terms of value because now they could replace, let's say, 20 to 30% of their time on lower level for them activities, things that still need to maybe get done and maybe some that don't. But now they're able to grab that time, if they're intentional, and spend it in higher value areas. So it's not just good for us, but it's good for our team and it's good for others because it allows others to integrate in their purpose. Like God said, that we're all members of the body. So if the eye is trying to be the hand, it just won't work as well as it could. So delegation becomes really important. There's barriers to some of this, which we won't go into in-depth view here on delegation, but other than just to say, you may struggle with it if you're high control, because high control can also lead to lack of trust. Now there's creating clarity around how to do it and doing it well and doing it at a certain standard. But this is the visual of how your team members can come into your world pull off some of what you're doing to elevate how you're spending your time. Now, for them, what they can do is maybe their highest and best use in their role is actually something that's lower, obviously, in your triangle. Maybe it's your mid-level, maybe it's something that's on that lower level. But then that becomes something that they can grow into. And maybe it's something that they're not even doing it, but they could if they were trained and developed and shown how to. So if we go to the next slide, it really kind of pulls all this together to say, you know, how are they going to get this into their week? How are they going to get this into their year as annual goals? How are they going to then take those annual goals and get them into quarterly priorities, which we call rocks in our world? This is really important for the team because now the team can become clear on how their priorities and how they're growing in their career steps into what you need to be accomplished. And it also allows you to hire because now you're clear on your mid-level and lower level task of what needs to be delegated or what others need to step into. That will allow you, well, again, with your limited time, with your limited capacity, to step into what God has for you next in your career and on your journey. So as we close, ultimate success as a leader, okay, goes beyond ourselves. And it's not supposed to be all about us. It's supposed to be about the team and the mission that God has given us and how that goes into generations. So allowing others to join us and investing in individuals, investing in teams and our companies, and ultimately the mission that they have to be able to live on and flourish beyond us and not without us. If you stepped away, would the mission grow and flourish, or would it die down? Ultimate success, I would argue, is being able to pass along that torch, not just to where it's not dropped, but to where the flame goes brighter every time it's passed. And for that, it means we need to invest in our teams. We need to pour in others and systems and technology to come along and be able to help us accomplish that so that things are able to flourish beyond just being dependent upon ourselves. And as an example, going back to Jesus, he poured into 12, 11 of them made it. And look what God was able to do through the 11 that carried on and all that they poured into generations. And ultimately, we've all been impacted by their faithfulness. So as I close, may we seek God on all these things. May we listen to him. God, what are you saying about my team? What are you saying about me? What should I do more of? What should I be doing less of? And how can I honor you with all of it? So thank you for allowing me to share. Ken, I'll let you come back and see if there's any questions for those that are out there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Greg, for that. And yeah, if we could, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts that you'd like to contribute, you can do that in the chat. Please do it. We'd love to bring those in and be able to interact on that. I was really struck when the question of 3 things you need to spend time on to accomplish in the year, to really just get down to those 3 things and to really focus on that and to say, okay, where do I need to focus my time and attention? Great thought. Be
Ken,
curious.
what are those for you? No, I'm kidding, but hopefully,
right. Give me some time to work on it. One's got to be my golf game, Greg. It's got to be my golf game at the top. So
golf. Pickleball is on my whole life list for sure, so I can appreciate it.
Oh, that's great. Hey, the other thing that struck me, I've got the question. You mentioned about your interest in being a pilot. Did the fact that it was going to be a little cramped in a cockpit for you, that being the tall guy, that might have been like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work.
Well, I started out flying a Cessna 152, which is just a crazy plane. And I remember on my first couple of flights, I started losing kind of blood flow in my legs. So we went to the 172, and I was a little bit more comfortable there.
That's great. Oh, good stuff. I love it. Well, one of the things that I had jotted down here, as you were talking about adding value and so forth, and you made the comment that sometimes as a leader, for a high control leader, that it can be difficult for us to have that trust, to develop the trust. There can be a sense of maybe the control removes that delivery of a sense of trust to the team. So maybe, your thoughts on that as far as just how do we maybe overcome that as leaders? Because most, a lot of the leaders are probably on this webinar today. Yeah, I mean, to be able to be an entrepreneur and to move forward and break ground, there's a lot of control there. You got to move. So How do we overcome that? Any thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. On one hand, there's areas where I delegate well. And personally, there have been some areas in the last year that I have seen projects getting stopped or goals getting stopped. And I'm realizing I'm too much in the way.
Mm,
And so I'm really questioning, how do I get better at getting out of the way? And I think there is a control element. Like I said, there's a
sure.
standard that I want to make sure that it's achieved. And that's not bad. But I think it's finding a way to where you can encourage,
Mm,
celebrate, ask questions, and allow others to step into the design. If it's all our idea, all our design, it's going to be hard for someone to find themselves and take ownership of it. And passing along that baton is important, but also allowing agency, which
mm,
is each of our individual voices and abilities stepping into it.
yeah.
There's just more satisfaction.
Hmm.
There's more,
Sure.
one of the things I talk about sometimes with this area is there's a task mindset versus an
Mm,
ownership mindset.
mm-hmm.
So the way that that may look when somebody first comes into our company is they may request something from the client, and I may say, "Hey, let's get this information," and they may
Mm,
send an email to the client,
mm,
and then a week or a few days later, I could check back in and go, "Hey, we've got the upcoming meeting. Have you gotten anything?" And
mm,
they'd say, "No, I sent them an email, but I haven't heard back." Right? That would be a task mindset. I checked it off my list. It's somebody else's problem. An ownership mentality would be, I'm following up professionally because I know that it's important to help see this through for the team and for the client. Right? So this
mm,
idea of ownership and agency and allowing people to understand what an outcome is. But
mm,
we as leaders need to be better at painting a picture of what that looks like and what it doesn't
yeah.
look like, and allowing them to speak into this. And I think in that, what we'll find is there's some ways of doing things that we haven't even thought of, and we can say and paint a picture for what outcomes should kind of look like so that we are aligned and going in a general direction, but allowing people
Yeah.
more and more of their own voice and their own style, because sometimes we want it done our way because we think
Yeah.
it's the best way, but sometimes what that means is we want our style when honestly that's probably not the best, because if everything's done in your style, then how are you going to grow your team and get their involvement and ownership driving where you ultimately would want it to be, which is beyond us anyway.
Yeah. I'm going to just jump over here into this question too from John Woods. It ties into that. Thanks, John, for your comment. But saying thank you, Greg. I felt like your statement about needing to focus and say no more was key as I grow as a leader. I'm always said yes, and so that even that that idea of how do we filter down and say if I say no, that means someone else is going to have to say yes, right?
Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe it's just not a priority, because
Sure.
honestly, their time is limited too. So we've got to really protect and value the time of our team.
Hmm.
Their time is very valuable. And now, but at the same time, in their role, there are things that they can step into, and they may need help identifying what those are. We did an exercise here at this FCCI event yesterday, and it was, what do we feel like Jesus wants us to keep doing?
Hmm.
What is it that we feel like Jesus wants us to stop doing? And what is it Jesus wants us to start doing?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
keep doing, stop doing, start doing. The hardest one to think about for me, and there was a couple of other people that resonated with that, was what is it that we feel like he wants us to stop doing?
Yeah. Hmm.
That required more thinking, that required more stillness and more honest reflection of saying, yeah, there are limits. I know it's hard. I know you've been doing that thing. I know it's comfortable. But in order for us to go to that next level for our teams and our organizations, I mean, if we're limiting ourselves, it's not just about us, it's about our
Yeah.
teams and it's about the missions that we're a
Sure.
part of. And so if we're not taking that seriously, then it's going to limit the mission that God could otherwise have for us, I would argue.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And even this ties in, I believe, with Janice, her comment about I submit speed to the slowest person. If the leader's going too fast, no one can join them. So you had mentioned early on about that idea of, how fast am I moving? So your thoughts on,
Yeah,
how do we adjust to the team and
yeah,
what does that look like?
yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great one. There's this book called The Goal by, I think, Eli Goldratt. It's a book on operations and systems, and he argues that he talks about a Boy Scout troop going on a hike,
Hmm.
and there's one kid that's slower than everybody else. So how do you go faster? Well, it required coming alongside of him, helping to share the pack, maybe putting him closer to the front, and then seeing whatever they could do to help them go faster. Now, that really spoke to bottlenecks more
Hmm.
in an organization in terms of our processes, but it could also be people. Something could be happening to our to people on our team. So if we're going too fast for our people, do they have what they need? Are they being trained? Are they being equipped? I know sometimes when I've gone too fast for a team, I wasn't training them well enough,
Mm,
and I wasn't speaking and preparing them well enough.
yeah.
Now, again, we can't do everything. So maybe other team members need to come in and participate in that process, and it doesn't need to be all just you. But other people do they have what they need to go at the pace that's desired, required, what have you, or appropriate? Um, is some really good questions that, if you're going so fast and people are becoming, you're kind of running over people,
Mm-hmm.
or you're going so fast where things aren't done with the level of quality and excellence that you feel like God would really have for you. That those are important questions to wrestle with. Now, sometimes we can also put our style on what we think success. We want it to be perfect, and we could go at the pace of perfect, right? Um, when that may not. So there's a healthy blend. I think all of this for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And even around that, I've been reading book by Bill Yeargin, The Education of a CEO recently, Greg, and I love
Mm,
it. I love his perspective, and in part of it, he references Patrick Lencioni, where he's talking about the fact that there's reward centered leaders and responsibility centered leaders. And I
mm,
loved that phrasing of that. It kind of speaks to a lot of what you were saying here today of just what is driving us, what motivates that process of being responsible and understanding our identity and how do we step into the role that God's called us to and what's driving us. So just I love that perspective and that thought of what is it that's motivating me in that, and even as I think about my team, my responsibility to them and how I serve them well, as you talked about doing that and seeking that opportunity to find that purpose that God's planted within us. What is it that God's put there?
yeah.
Colossians 3:23 you mentioned, and I love that. Finding that purpose from within is
Yeah.
just a beautiful thing.
Well, and our point on that is I think that what you just said is so key. It's the responsibility. And I think as believers, we need to be taking faithful stewardship very, very seriously. Now, within a healthy boundaries, I've seen some people take the stewardship thing, but like the mission matters. The people that are on the team matter. Developing a team well matters. Growing in a healthy way matters. Serving our clients with excellence matters. And so we need, and going beyond ourselves matters. And so it's more about the mission. It's more about the
Yeah,
team. It's more about clients, than it is about us. And so it can't be just about us, right? And
mm-hmm.
so I think if we take it
Yeah,
seriously, then we'll have a high view of faithful stewardship that's in a God honoring way and that's healthy. I think then we bring in a missional, longevity, impactful, multiplication
mm-hmm.
view of how do we multiply the mission and multiply others and invest in them.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's great. Great perspective. Well, Greg, this has really been good. Thank you so much, and for the
Thank you.
encouragement here today, and enjoy your time there. Yeah. And if you get a chance, get out and play some golf. You got to play some golf while you're there.
Maybe I'll find a putting green,
There you go.
I
At
can-
least do that. Enjoy it. So,
Hey, if I'm hitting a driver, it can go anywhere, but it's at least within a tighter range there as I'm closer to the green.
good stuff. Well, Greg, we'll look forward to chatting again sometime soon. But thanks again, brother, for sharing all this today. It's
All
been
right.
really good. Thanks
Thanks,
for the
Ken.
time.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure. All right.
Well, as we wrap up here today, I'm just so thankful for Greg, for Blue Trust, for their partnership, and for what's been shared, and hope that it's been a blessing to you. Reminder again that we'll be together next month for a wonderful time as we come into another webinar series, another part of our webinar series, and enjoy the time with Lori and talking about how we can, in fact, bring great biblical standards into HR practice. So we look forward to seeing you there on April 15th. Again, thanks for joining us here today.